One has to imagine any actor would feel extremely lucky not only to star in Academy Award-nominated and César Award-winning films, but also to have a career so varied that throughout your filmography, you're fortunate enough to work with the likes of Alec Baldwin, Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, Ethan Hawke, Annette Bening, Dan Aykroyd, John Candy, Anthony Hopkins, Robert Redford, and even Steven Seagal, and have all of those illustrious talents, and Seagal, praise your work. Now, imagine the potential jealousy of an up-and-coming actor when they learn the performer in question, who managed to pull off these impressive feats, was not even human. No, these accolades actually belong to one of the most famous animal actors of all time, a 9-foot-tall, 1,500-pound male Kodiak named Bart the Bear. Born in January of 1977 at the Baltimore Zoo, Bart was adopted as a 5-week-old cub by Utah animal trainers Doug and Lynn Seuss. After reaching adulthood, Bart made his film debut in the 1981 western Windwalker, and would go on to appear in 1986's Clan of the Cave Bear, 1987's Benji the Hunted, and 1988's The Great Outdoors, before his big breakout performance in another 88 film, Jean-Jacques Annaud's French family adventure movie, The Bear. The critically acclaimed film saw Bart star as an adult Kodiak who befriends an orphaned grizzly bear cub, and follows them as they attempt to evade hunters pursuing them through the Canadian wilderness. The movie was a financial and critical success, earning Annaud a César Award, the National Film Awards for France, for Best Director. And there was even a brief but highly supported campaign to nominate Bart for Best Actor at that year's Academy Awards, though ultimately the Academy stated they would never nominate a non-human for any award. Still, the success of the film and the media attention around its star made Bart a pop culture sensation. He was made the spokesbearer for the Vital Ground Foundation, dedicated to preserving threatened wildlife habitats, and his acting career would continue with appearances in White Fang, On Deadly Ground, Legends of the Fall, 12 Monkeys, and the Homeward Bound movies. His second most famous role came in 1997, when he reunited with his Legends of the Fall co-star Anthony Hopkins, stalking him and Alec Baldwin through the wilderness in the hit survival thriller The Edge. Famed film critic Kenneth Turan called Bart's work in The Edge the capstone of an illustrious career and a milestone in ursine acting. And though he'd been denied the Oscar nomination before, in 1998, Bart finally did appear on stage at the Academy Awards, handing an envelope to Mike Myers as part of a salute to animal actors. Sadly, 1998 also saw Bart diagnosed with cancer. After a 2-year battle with the disease, Bart was humanely euthanized in May of 2000, at the age of 23. His legacy would somewhat live on with Bart the Bear 2, an unrelated Alaskan brown bear cub Doug and Lynn Seuss adopted shortly before Bart's death, and decided to name after him in tribute. Bart the Bear 2 would go on to have a fairly successful acting career of his own, though arguably somewhat less prestigious, as most of his roles came in comedies like Without a Paddle, Did You Hear About the Morgans, and Zookeeper. His last film role was as a slasher-esque deadly bear stalking James Marsden and Thomas Jane in the 2015 straight-to-VOD horror film Into the Grizzly Maze. After a period of declining health, Bart the Bear 2 would pass away in his Utah home in 2021, at the age of 21. If Bart the Bear 2's filmography feels less impressive than his predecessor, it can be somewhat forgiven. The original Bart the Bear came from a different era of Hollywood, a more practical FX-driven era, when filmmakers were less tempted to simply resort to CGI for important animal performances. In fact, in 2017, a major superhero franchise film went into production with a lead role, a villainous demonic bear that would serve as the film's chief antagonist, that on paper would have seemed perfect for Bart the Bear 2. And yet, even though Bart the Bear 2 had previously appeared in an episode of Game of Thrones, a series featuring one of this film's stars, it's doubtful the filmmakers even considered the use of a real bear in favor of the CGI creation they ultimately went with. I guess that's showbiz. The year is 2020, and 20th Century Studios and Marvel Entertainment are finally ready to release a long-delayed new spin-off of a popular, but now seemingly completed cinematic universe, a film that at one time was meant to start the next big superhero franchise with The New Mutants. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Fair Letter Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. New Mutants, more like new mistress, because we have a guest here on the podcast, and both of Trev's mistresses, I think, are here.
Wow.
For the first time. So which one is the real one? I don't know. Well, I guess we'll discuss it.
That's a great question. I can't wait to see what Trev says.
Look, this is a Sophie's Choice. You're not going to force me. Oh, I don't know. Did she pick one of them? I haven't seen Sophie's Choice in a long time. I don't know yet. But
I don't think it's the choice that you think it is.
You're not going to force me. No, actually, Joe, we didn't tell you. It is that choice. So
shit.
Wow, the end of this episode is going to be very, very surprising for one of you two.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No, we do have a special guest with us, and that is my buddy Joe, who is the co-host of my other podcast. And why he's here will make sense in just a moment. There's a very, very particular reason we decided to recruit Joe in for this episode, and that is, Chris, you got to say it. Don't you want to say we're breaking off a new theme here?
We are. Oh my God! Sometimes I am ready for that, but I got thrown off because I was thinking about what you two do behind my back. So I couldn't really get my stuff together. Yes, we are entering a new theme. It's a new year, new theme. It's January, but on Failure to Franchise, we are in the Mutant Gene-uary. That's where we are today.
That's right.
That's really clever, guys.
But we didn't want to travel too far from our previous episode, so we decided to, we're like, you know what? We really enjoyed doing that Power Rangers episode, so let's do another teen superhero movie with a cast member from Stranger Things, and that is why we are kicking off the Mutant Gene-uary with 2020's The New Mutants. And before, I know, Chris, this is where you normally tell us a little bit about the movies, or the movie, but we're going to if we can just put a pause on that just for a second. So I'm going to just
hold
explain.
Hold your horses, Chris, okay? Hold your horses.
Yeah, the reason I've recruited Joe for this episode is since 2015, Joe and I have hosted an X-Men podcast called Days of Future Podcast, examining the X-Men, where we look at the X-Men comics, the movies, the cartoons, the TV shows, the action figures, the toys, the whole kit and caboodle.
You missed one category there that you
Lego sets.
Well, yeah, I got that next to me, but
the weather. Oh yeah, you know what? Sorry,
X-Men hentai.
Yeah,
Chris. Sorry, really quick. We have to pause since I know some Days of Future podcast listeners will be listening. Joe, how about that weather out there?
Bitter cold today.
Bitter cold, I know. Okay.
Bitter.
We had to get that out. We had to get that away. We always talk about it.
Seeing that I'm in Canada and right now in the beginning of January, I can tell you, I agree. I'm with you.
A wintry mix outside.
Soon to be our 51st state. So anyways, Joe and I have obviously...
You know what? I'm just waiting for the currency conversion. That's, I might be okay. It's really bad right now, so...
Yeah, wait till you get our health care, buddy.
That's true.
So Joe and I have talked about this movie a lot over the years because I said we've been doing the show since 2015. So we have a lot of history with both this property and this movie. So I thought it'd be fun to bring Joe in and obviously Chris, we're interested to hear what your whole background with this is, if any. But why don't you go ahead and tell us about the film as we often like to start with. So tell us about 2020's The New Mutants. What is this thing?
It's a loaded question, number one. It's going to take 90 minutes to 2 hours to tell you. Okay. This is directed by Josh Boone. He's the director of The Fault in Our Stars. That was based on a novel, right?
Yeah, it's a John Green YA novel.
Green,
yeah.
Right. It is written by Josh Boone as well, plus his, childhood friend, Nate Lee. If you don't know who Nate Lee is, that's okay. He came up with a lot of the Jackass 3D concepts, I guess. That's his claim to his claim to fame on IMDb. Jackass 3D concepts. Okay.
We laugh, but I'd kill for that job.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. I think I had that job. I think I came up with some of those concepts.
Now imagine you're the guy that created or came up with the concept of the slingshot outhouse.
One of the best.
Porta potty.
And then I was trying to all those movies blend together in my head, so I couldn't remember which concepts were from which one. But...
Well, the slingshot porta potty, but then moving on to getting a big budget X-Men film to write. The budget of The New Mutants is honestly for this time of when these movies are being made, $67 million is the budget. Kind of unheard of for a modern superhero movie, I would say. Domestically, it made $23.8 million and worldwide $49 million. Now, we have to put a big asterisk here. This movie was eventually released in August of 2020, which is right smack dab in the middle of COVID. So it was released in theaters, but also on VOD. So
you guys had COVID up in Canada too?
I
didn't know that.
Yes.
Dang. All right. Wow.
We did, you know what? We did okay.
You did okay? All right, great. Good. I'm happy for you guys.
Yeah, I think we actually have to put like multiple asterisks on that, because it's not just the COVID of it all with this one, and obviously we'll get into this, but this movie had a lot riding against it when it came out. It's not, obviously it was struck with a really unfortunate release date, but this was another one of those the writing was on the wall kind of movies, and again, we're not getting into our thoughts on the film, but I think it's just honest to say right off the bat that as I said, Joe and I charted the entire history of this movie, its entire production, and it was just like, it seemed like a cursed film. This is definitely one of those cursed movie kind of episodes where we're going to talk a lot about just a production that never seemed like it was able to get any kind of traction under it in the way that even gave it much of a chance of being a hit. So that's it's not, the COVID part is obviously a big deal, but this movie was probably dead on arrival no matter what.
It's funny that you talk about how much you and Joe have talked about this movie in the past, on mic and obviously off mic. But I was looking back at my texts, and I'm not one to delete threads. I kind of like going back and referencing old stuff and old conversations. But I searched in my phone and I messaged just the New Mutants, or just New Mutants. And even our conversations go back to 2017. And every 6 months, we're delayed again. What is this movie? Delayed again. So it's quite a bit.
I mean, those delays, so much so that it eventually even became a joke in the marketing, right? They even had to acknowledge the delays themselves. But this is an interesting one where when we started the show, we were trying to figure out what the show would be, and we knew we had some base rules, okay, there are going to be movies that failed to start franchises, obviously, And then if you remember, we had a brief moment where we talked about, would it be interesting every once in a while to do movies that also ended franchises? And ultimately we decided that's kind of diluting the water a little bit, and we were no, let's just stick to the idea. But this movie is kind of
depressing as hell, because it would just be constant bombs.
Well, speaking of depressing as hell, this movie is kind of the rare double whammy, right? That is both. This movie is a movie that fails to start a franchise, but also is arguably, not even arguably, I mean, it just is the end of a larger overall franchise. And again, whether that's entirely the movie's fault, or if that it was kind of coming out, if that already on it, still, that's part of the interesting conversation about this movie. This is a very infamous movie just for a lot of reasons. So I think it'll be kind of fascinating to take a look at.
How soon? What's the timing difference between Dark Phoenix and this movie?
Well, when they were filmed or when they were released?
Released, released. Because was this the last Fox?
This came out after Dark Phoenix, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But started filming before.
For sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Go ahead.
No, you go. You're a guest. Feel free.
Wow.
Feel free.
Well, you see how I get treated here, Trev? You don't treat me like this back home.
Don't get any ideas.
You don't treat me like this at home, okay?
Trev, I muted him a while ago. It's okay.
I just if you were to say, hey, which kind of blew up the Fox franchise for the X-Men movies, I would say Dark Phoenix. And this was just a little piddly, I don't know, accidents right at the end. They were
like a little epilogue or something.
They were oh shit, we didn't release this one. Here it is. So
I mean, that's definitely what it felt like when it came out. I just checked; it's not that much of a difference. Dark Phoenix came out on June 7th of 2019, and then actually, fairly significant. Actually, about a year.
Yeah, over a year.
Yeah.
Well, Dark Phoenix caused COVID, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was the reason it started, so that tracks.
Yep. Yeah, I remember sitting in the theater watching it and just suddenly feeling my lungs fill up and
you kept coughing on people. It was really weird. Yeah.
I actually will say I mean, not to I don't even know if it matters, but I'm in the very big or a very small minority of mild Dark Phoenix defenders, in only that I don't really think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's just totally kind of fine. I don't know. It definitely is it feels like the X-Men franchise just petering out at the end, but I don't think it deserved the ire it got when it came out.
I remember me and you being a little bit of a defender for it. And
Yeah.
again, I still think it's like not great at all.
Yeah,
but
I mean, have I gone back and rewatched it? No.
No. But there was something there was something about even the team dynamic that was really nice in that movie, and some of the action was pretty good. And
you still have a cast you like.
Of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that time was just so strange. 2019 to the release of this movie, because of just the monumental thing that happened. And we're going to get into like the details of what exactly did happen with this movie, but a huge part of it is Disney bought Fox. So we'll get to that in a bit here. But first, before we go too off track about the movie itself, let's give a little glimpse to the failure to franchise listeners that aren't as familiar with the New Mutants as a concept. I think where most of all of us know what the X-Men are. Like, again, we've just said we've had a history from 2000 all the way up to 2020, really. So 20 years of X-Men and mutants. But what exactly are the New Mutants? Because I'll tell you from my end, X-Men is like really they're my favorite superheroes, but it's been a while since I've like dove into the comics. Like, you guys are the experts. I'm gonna give it up to you for sure. So correct me when I inevitably say the wrong thing.
We will. We will. I think the New Mutants are a really interesting franchise, right? And so this concept of X-Men are what, 1963, right? Mm-hmm. They're the teenagers, right? They're living in this mansion. They start to, over the decades, like age up to be more of this like action-packed, mature team, right? And to kind of broaden the scope of things, they created a new team of kind of trying to replicate that magic. Oh, pun intended. The magic
Hell
of
yeah.
it. By having a new team that also lives at the mansion of younger, kind of the understudies, right?
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, what we should definitely say, we should bring Chris Claremont's name into this, because Chris Claremont became like the X-Men writer throughout the 70s, and like Dark Phoenix, the Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, like all the really, really classic X-Men stories you've heard of and are aware of were Chris Claremont. And so when he took over that title, it just became one of the biggest successes for Marvel, and that really led like the publishers to like really push for him to add more titles. And like, Chris Claremont is not a man who goes with like the trends. He definitely does not fit into the current marketplace, because he really had the sense of like, no, we shouldn't dilute this brand by creating more titles. But they just kept pushing, and finally he agreed to like do this offshoot. But I think the reason what made like New Mutants really interesting, this idea to say, well, let's call them the New Mutants and let's have them be teenagers, is the other idea Chris Claremont was always like really into. And I love this idea, and I really wish he'd been able to pull it off, but you just can't in mainstream comics. Was he really liked this idea of like, let's treat the X-Men franchise as like an ongoing storyline, ongoing soap opera with real timeline continuity and chronology, to where the X-Men will eventually age, and we'll have the characters either die or retire, and they won't be the X-Men anymore. And we will constantly be introducing new X-Men so over the years, like if he had his way, like Cyclops would be like an old man in the comics now, right? And if anything, he would just be like a mentor figure. But most of these, the original X-Men, they'd be gone. And we'd be watching, probably these new mutant characters as like the elder statesmen at this point, and we'd have a couple classes below them. And that would have just kept evolving and evolving. But of course, you can't really do that in a mainstream comic world where,
right,
no one ever ages appropriately, and it gets really, really confusing as you read along. But that was his idea of saying like, well, if the other mutants have gotten older and people really like the idea of the X-Men as a teenage, group of students, well, why don't we try to revisit that territory again? So New Mutants was kind of, and we shouldn't say it's just Chris Claremont. He had a co-creator, Bob McLeod, and they debuted these characters in a graphic novel in 1982, I believe, and then their ongoing series started in 1983.
Yeah, and so the original team, I don't know if I'm going off of memory on this one, is not who we're going to get in the movie here, right?
Pretty close, though.
So,
yeah, only one
difference.
person. Yeah, one person's flipped out, which honestly I can see why they would, just probably because of the similarity in power. But go on. Sorry, go on.
Not even that. It's just also the current popularity.
Okay.
But again, that's something we can speak to as well. Yeah. So.
It interestingly enough, like the New Mutants were popular, and had really interesting storylines. I think that original run and a lot of the original art, which they've tried to embrace in the movie at some point with Bill Sienkiewicz, it was really great to read with those original characters, and they would change out some, and new characters would come and go, but the main cast kind of stayed the same up until at least the early 90s, right, is when they really switched the New Mutants of who they were.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be slight changes here and there, but yeah, I mean, the New Mutants was a hit right off the bat. I mean, it was a popular title. Joe, I even remember. So for the listeners who don't know, like when Joe and I started the X-Men podcast, one of the things Joe decided to do was try and read the entire history of like the X-Men comics, like every title in order. And he made it really, really far. It was really kind of impressive. But I even remember for you, like in that read through, I remember when you got to New Mutants, and just as like Marvel was hoping, it seemed like it was like the shot of adrenaline for you, because even the standard X-Men title had been, not to say it had gotten boring. Chris Claremont was always, an exciting writer, but it had been like a lot of the same for like a while. And so the New Mutants was this like kind of like rejuvenation of the entire franchise. And so you had these 5 new young characters, and it was just a whole new set of dynamics, and it did have a very different feel than the main X-Men books. And I think one of the things we have to talk about is, Josh Boone, his whole approach to this movie was this should have a different feel than the rest of the X-Men movies. Is that necessarily in line with how the New Mutant books felt different than the X-Men comics? That's an interesting discussion.
It's funny because you say that, and he says that, that he wants to make them different. But the way he pitched this to Fox and to Simon Kinberg was using Chris Claremont's books and using Bob McLeod's art, and like patching together a comic book of his own with his friend, Nate Lee, and using that to pitch an idea for a trilogy of sorts. So it's funny that he goes on to say he wants to make it totally different than what we're used to, a la Deadpool in a weird way, but then also kind of using the like the design work and everything, you know what I mean, to make a pitch, but then also kind of go back on it. It just seems a little, like we said before, this movie was dead on arrival. There's a lot going on with this movie, and I think that we're going to talk about the studio interference, of course. It's always the same old story with a movie like this, but it doesn't even seem like Josh Boone had a grasp on what he wanted to do for the movie.
The thing is, I think he had a really strong grasp of what he wanted to do, but this is the thing, and it's something that if you go back and listen to all of Joe and I's old episodes talking about the development of this movie that went along, I bet you would hear us sound kind of interested in it, but it's the kind of thing with like hindsight and like seeing what happened and kind of thinking back on it, I start to think the vision he had is maybe part of the problem, right? Because what I was getting at is I think what he means by he can use the Claremont stories. I mean, Claremont did write both titles, right? He was writing X-Men and New Mutants, but they still had vastly different feelings to them. And in particular, New Mutants felt, even though it was still a mutant book, I think Joe would agree, it felt very grounded compared to X-Men. X-Men by that point had become a very cosmic book with Dark Phoenix and the Brood and things like that, and they were off in space and a lot of time travel elements. And New Mutants kind of took you back to like what if this was just like a high school drama?
Yeah, teen drama.
Yeah, there's curfew. There's curfew in the mansion, or so and so.
And even that, if you go back and you go back and read that initial graphic novel, and all these characters are introduced in very kind of socially heated moments, right? There's a lot of like it was really bringing back like the racism elements and the civil rights kind of struggle element to the book, which had always been a part of it, but it maybe been kind of lost as the X-Men became more space adventurers. Right. So suddenly New Mutants felt just more real, and like the younger readers I think really responded to it. And that's what always made it feel different. And then there was this one storyline that is very iconic because the art was amazing and it was very like well done. And that's the Demon Bear storyline. And it's maybe I would arguably the most iconic storyline from the original New Mutants run. But obviously Josh Boone really locked onto that. And so his talk kept being like, well, this is going to be the horror X-Men franchise. This is going to be like, we're going to be, the whole trilogy is going to be like horror tinged. And I think at the time I was like, well, that's cool because we, in 2016, 2017, that is the point. We've talked about this before in other movies we've done where we were hitting this like level of exhaustion with superhero movies and going, they need to start doing something like that, right? We need superhero westerns. We need superhero horror. We need superhero rom-coms. We need something different. But now, like I said, in retrospect, you wonder, I don't know. Joe, would you agree? When I think back of New Mutants, I don't think of it as a horror book. I mean, I get Demon Bear is like the most iconic story, but like, it's not any darker in general than the other X titles.
Well, this is where movies as a medium are different than comic books. I know I'm not breaking any new ground here, but comic books, you have monthly titles, right?
Yes.
You can go in different arcs to kind of creep into different genres.
Totally.
You could even have characters who almost, they seem connected to each other, but when they kind of leave that world, they can be in different genres. But when you're making a 90-minute, thank God, 90-minute movie, you kind of have to pick something. And it's really hard to do. And so while the Demon Bear has these scary elements due to, the storyline and the art, it doesn't mean that that's what the New Mutants were always about, right?
Yeah.
I think the concept of teenagers in a scary situation has been something that's existed for a long time, and so the New Mutants were perfect for that.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask both of you this question because Josh Boone has come out, not recently, but in the last few years, saying his plans for the 3 movies, right? And, this first movie, he wanted to be a supernatural horror movie. The second movie was an alien invasion film. And then the third one was an apocalyptic horror film. So, all 3 were based in a horrific situation and leaning into it. And, from what I'm getting from you both that is not the way to go.
So those 3 storylines, he's referring to Warlock, who is this kind of, weird, I don't know, a robotic type character who's the sentient phalanx type taking a shape, and he wanted Sacha Baron Cohen to play him. That was a big storyline, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't
and a big character, yeah.
It wasn't scary, though. I definitely wouldn't call it a horror sort of thing, but it was part of it. But it was teenagers based in reality find this weird guy, right? And then the other one, that third part would be Inferno, which is a very popular crossover of all the X-Men franchises, right? So I could see the through line that he had of here are 3 popular stories that these characters can go on this journey, and it's going to be great. Except in comic books, it's just a different journey to get to that.
Because all those storylines are buttressed by other storylines, like you're saying,
Right.
throughout the year and throughout the
Yes.
other titles, and it's. He picked 3 really famous and really beloved stories to adapt. Demon Bear, Warlock and the Phalanx Covenant, and Inferno. And I want to see all those on screen? Sure, of course. As an X-Men fan, I do. I think he just maybe made a strategic mistake saying a horror story is the right way to introduce these characters. I don't know if a horror, just a singular, let's make a horror movie. And I get his thinking. I get this is what, the 13th or 14th movie overall in the Fox X-Men franchise. Even I'm sure he was thinking variety is good at this point.
Yeah.
But you just have to ask yourself, is that really the best way to introduce these characters? Because you're throwing people off of what they're expecting to see from this franchise.
Well, he's so adamant about being a Stephen King meets John Hughes movie. There's no supervillains, there's no uniforms, none of that stuff. Throw everything out and be a full-fledged supernatural horror movie with teenagers. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but I just feel again, dead on arrival. But yeah, Joe, sorry, go on.
I don't know if we can talk about this later. The interesting thing about the New Mutants is they actually are one of the superhero teams that really has a uniform.
Yeah.
They don't
Exactly.
get their own. They just get this basic one and have forever. Everyone wears the same thing. But I wonder, and I don't know, I don't know when you guys want to delve into certain things, but I do, watching it again, I'm this could have worked, but some of the pillars of filmmaking didn't hit. The script was bad. If you say, hey, we're making this 5 superheroes who don't know they're captive and are stuck in this hospital that they think is a school, I could say, oh, okay, maybe that'll work. But there was no tension, and the script didn't work, and the directing wasn't very good. And so I could see where Josh Boone was going with it. If you do something small, and then all of a sudden these characters that you've grown to love in this first movie are then put into this giant epic adventure of a alien race coming, and then the third one is them fighting this apocalyptic, hell on Earth. Yeah, I could see that being a fun journey for the characters. But that's all well and good when you write a treatment. But if you can't do these basic things, it's just not going to work.
Well, yeah, but to be fair, you were just talking too about like the behind the scenes stuff and how that might have like factored in. And again, we have to keep in mind, we mentioned Dark Phoenix earlier. The interesting thing about both these movies too, and Chris alluded to this already, is that these movies both were just kind of writing on the wall movies when they came out, right? Because Disney had bought Fox, and so both these came out with the understanding that like these aren't really going anywhere. This is wrapping up, and Disney's probably
a huge question mark. Huge question mark.
If nothing, at best, a question mark, right? But really, most people are pretty sure, like, if anything, this franchise is going to take a long break for a while, and we're not going to see immediate follow-ups to this. So even during, like, the development of this movie, whatever those, like, trilogy plans were Josh Boone had, you have to wonder if maybe he should have started kind of, like, reining that in and thinking more about, like, well, maybe this is just a singular movie, And that kind of gets into, Chris, I know we want to talk about, we've already, like, hinted at it, but just the crazy development process of this movie, right? Even beyond just it getting going and like Josh Boone even becoming attached, because this is a movie that Lauren Schuler Donner wanted to do as part of the X-Men franchise very early on. Instead, they were just like waiting for the right filmmaker, and then Josh Boone pitches himself, and everyone gets excited. But that just starts this like long process. And honestly, by the time this movie hits, I mean, it hits much later than they were expecting, obviously, and it goes into production thinking it's just going to be another cog of like this long running X-Men franchise, but instead it comes out as like the last little button on a now pretty much dead franchise. But maybe we should talk about what that journey looked like, because I don't think we want to sit here and chronicle every release date. We don't have that kind of time. But
I was just sorry.
Can I jump in real quick? I want to say one thing. I bet the Fox executives were salivating over Josh Boone. I mean, here's a guy. The Fault in Our Stars was like had a budget of like 10 million and made like 100 million, right? Like this guy took a teen story based on a book and made it this huge moneymaker. And then he wants to jump in on your superhero teen story.
Totally.
Oh my gosh, this is gonna be the best thing ever. They were so ready for that.
Well, and Joe, if you remember too, like there was a Comic-Con panel that they did as the movie was finally getting near to release, and you and I said on our show that like we were loving what we were hearing from Josh Boone. This is a guy that was so into this property and like really knew these characters, and it was exciting. It was like, oh my god, there's this acclaimed filmmaker coming in. He seems to really get this. This is a part of the X-Men franchise we were never sure we'd get in like film form, and like now we're getting it, and from a guy who really like cares about it and loves it. So like there was a lot of reason to be optimistic. Now he said some things after the movie came out and around the time of the release, which we'll talk about, but in general, like he was saying a lot of the right things. So I don't think Fox was alone. I think even the audience at one point was like, yeah, this might be the guy, and this might be what the X-Men franchise needs to kind of breathe some new life into it.
Can I just run through this development and production?
Please
I'm just
do.
I'm gonna kind of just list it through. Like if it, we'll hit all the
begins.
bookmark. The bookmarks of everything. Okay. So again, we mentioned Lauren Schuler Donner in 2009 says she's interested in making it. Josh Boone creates that comic book and gets the pitch, and they're interested. They're excited. He's hired in May of 2015. This movie's supposed to take place 3 years after X-Men Apocalypse, which came out in 2016. Then in 2016, Deadpool comes out and really proves that there's an interest in a different X-Men movie, right? And more, young adult vibe or an adult vibe even. There's rumors that James McAvoy, his Professor X, is going to be a big part of it. Alexandra Shipp's Storm is going to be a big part of it.
Can I just cut in right here, though?
Of course.
Where, like, whenever you say something where I say, like, okay, there might have been, like, looking back again, doing the retrospect thing, there might have been hints of problems. Like, one of their initial ideas was, like, and at this point, I know, is they're saying it's going to take place only 3 years after X-Men Apocalypse. Now, if you think about that for a second, you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, why would we need New Mutants already when we're talking with the reset timeline where the X-Men themselves are still supposed to be young? So right off that should have been like a warning klaxon right off the bat, but I guess we're just too excited,
But also, Trev, this X-Men timeline, everybody, like, it's just a total, complete, and utter crapshoot. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even nail down anything when it comes to the timeline. So I kind of give it a pass because it seems like nobody gave a shit about the timeline for a long time.
That's comic books, baby. That's like
that's
comic
one
books,
thing
and,
too, for sure.
it's for them. Concerns of timeline took took a backseat to what's the cast we can have, right? And if you can have James McAvoy and Alexander Shipp, that's more important than worrying about does it actually make sense to have New Mutants already? Yeah.
So Fox schedules the movie for its first release date, April 2018. Simon Kinberg is supposed to be helping a lot with the production. However, he spends a lot of it with Dark Phoenix because now basically 2 movies are running at the same speed at this point. Rosario Dawson is rumored to be in the movie. And then by the time this all comes by and there's a shooting script, Rosario Dawson's out. Alexander Shipp's out. James McAvoy's out. So it's becoming a completely different movie at this point.
I forgot about that Rosario Dawson. She would have been way better as Cecilia Reyes. That would have been...
Rosario's great.
She would have been great in that.
As long as they don't put a big, tentacled, stupid headset on her like she does in Ahsoka, and can actually move around. So.
That's funny. Well, I don't know if we're going to get into this, but there is a lot of controversy over the casting of some of these, and
we'll get into it.
Okay. Well, I'll save it for then.
Yeah.
I mentioned the shooting script. Can I just name you off some of these people? I know I mentioned there's 2 writers of this movie. Well, during this time, Fox kind of hired a big writers' room to generate ideas for this movie to tear it apart and put it back together. We got Scott Frank, we got Josh Zedemer, we got Chad and Carrie Hayes, Seth Graham-Smith, Neustadter and Weber. Another 6 people were involved in the writers' room. This is the shooting script. Yep. So not to mention of what went through in the following days. Then the casting begins, and I guess here we can talk a little bit about the casting now. Like we had mentioned before that the original team, we didn't actually name them, but the original team of the books is Cannonball, Samuel Guthrie, Karma, Mancao Zwan. I'm going to butcher that. It's the Vietnamese name. Mirage, Danielle Moonstar, Sunspot, Roberto DaCosta, and Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair. Out of there, Karma is excised out, and we bring in Magic. Ileana Rasputin is the character.
and to Joe and I that makes total sense because Karma kind of vanishes from the New Mutants book very fast as well. Okay. I think she's only in the first couple story arcs in the ongoing, and then she kind of disappears for a long time. She eventually finds her way back, as most characters do in the X-Men world.
Sure.
But and then not only does Ileana become more of a regular member of the book later on, but by the time this movie was coming along, Magic had become such a popular character, and that continues today. Okay. Magic is even Chris, I know you love your Matrix stuff and your coincidences. As we record this, we are 2 days away from finally a moment many X-Men comic fans been waiting for, the release of Magic's ongoing title for she's never had one before, and they're finally giving her one. But I would say, and Joe, would you agree that for the past 15 or so years, she's been one of the top 10, top 5 most popular X-Men characters? People love Magic.
Magic is the first person to really crack that 70s X-Men team or the 90s X-Men team of popularity, right? It's really been Storm, Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit sneaks in there. Yeah. Arcade, some really great guys. And then
don't listen to Josie's Arcade obsession.
And then but Magic has really joined that pantheon of iconic X-Men characters, and you look no further than the video game realm, which, if you like video games at all, who's a character in Marvel's Midnight Suns, the big, turn-based strategy game? It's Magic. Magic and Wolverine are in there. Who's on the initial roster of the big Marvel rivals, the Overwatch clone? It's Magic. Magic is the character that has really leapt into the big leagues over a lot of characters that have been around a lot longer than her.
It's funny, something we're sorry, Chris, if we're boring with this stuff, but something like Joe and I So something Joe and I talk a lot about on our show is like one of our frustrations with the X-Men franchise is that it often reverts back to being safe and just concentrating on the same 5 or 6 characters, right? And like even with like X-Men 97, a show that I do enjoy, I do love, but I have these reservations about how I worry that in the popular culture, that's the only roster people care about, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's interesting that like something Joe and I have talked about is how these characters, the New Mutants, they're introduced in the early 80s and they're thought to be like, this is the next generation, right? They're all going to grow up to become X-Men themselves. Mm-hmm. Well, do you know what most of these characters are called today? The New Mutants. Yeah. Right? Like there's still a book called The New Mutants, and most of these characters are still part of that team. They've all had their brief moments as the X-Men. Cannonball has been on the X-Men, like Mirage has been on the X-Men, but it never seems to stick, it never seems to last, except Magic, who is like a later addition to the New Mutants team, but she is the one who later breaks out, becomes an X-Men proper, and is just like obviously not going anywhere. She is now just kind of cemented as one of the most popular and most important X-Men characters.
She's got cool powers though. Like I think that's a big
cool powers, cool visual. That's why she looks great. She's got powers that are awesome. She's got the connection to Colossus, and she does have a super fascinating backstory too. So
yeah, and these other guys, like I'm looking at the list of their powers. Like one again, he's just really strong. Another one is they can transform into a wolf. Another one is just more psychic abilities. But there's something really cool about a Russian mutant with sorcery powers that can manifest a big sword and use teleportation discs to travel. And then has a pet little like dragon thing on their shoulder. That's great. Love it.
That is one of the things that makes Magic great too. Is her powers not only are cool, but they help with storytelling because you need to teleport places, right? You need this ability sometimes to be like, I need this, ability to be like, oh, we are now in Scotland. It's like that's a thing that she brings to the table. Similar to like Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler obviously can't do it as long distance as her, but that teleportation is something that every team kind of needs, and so she brings that to the table.
Yeah. I want to get back to a little bit of the release schedule of this. Again, we're not going to go through it piece by piece, but just know that there is a big kerfuffle of what Fox wants to put out there and what Josh Boone wants to put out there. And they get a little cold feet about making it more horror, so they pull it back. And Josh Boone says he felt a little neutered making this movie and that it was very stressful. However, in 2017, It comes out, and all of a sudden Fox is like, wait. Let's actually do more horror stuff. So Josh Boone is like, well, I brought this up in the beginning. Like, what movie do you want me to make? So there's reshoots that are planned to make it more quote-unquote horror, and then Disney buys Fox and delays it again, and COVID happens, delays it again. And these reshoots that I just mentioned just literally never happen because, like, at one of the reshoots Fox wanted was a post-credit with Antonio Banderas playing Sunspot's father. Again, more horror stuff that they wanted to add too. But a big reason why these reshoots didn't take place is in the 2 to 3 year period, these actors aged up. These New Mutants were played by fairly young actors and actresses, but 3 years later, this is where people change.
I was thinking that watching the movie, like I hadn't seen it since it came out, and I was just immediately struck by how young Anya Taylor-Joy looked in this.
Big time.
Just like, oh my God, that is not the Anya Taylor-Joy we know today. This is definitely the period where Joe and I were like constantly talking about this on our show because it was this just like constant hovering question of, are they going to be able to do these reshoots? Because if I remember correctly, it wasn't just it was also the fact that they finally did cobble together a New Mutants trailer, and that trailer was kind of horror tinged, and people seemed to like it. People like responded well enough to the trailer to where, again, Fox is like, oh man, I guess maybe between it and people actually responding to the trailer, maybe Boone was right the first time. Maybe this should be horror. So maybe we should let him go back and do these reshoots and do what he originally wanted. But like you said, between the cast aging up and obviously at this point Disney being in control and not really caring, and just it never really seemed like these reshoots were going to happen. But there was kept being this question of, are they going to be able to get these people together? And also they're all busy, right? Like you got them off doing Stranger Things and all these other movies, and it never seemed like it was going to come together. But there was always a thought maybe they'll let him go in and finish it, but nah, So,
No.
but it is funny. Like we've done, I don't know, Chris, how many movies have we done that's like the director has this vision, they pulled away from him, and then later they go, well, maybe you were right. Maybe you should go back and do that, but it just doesn't work. It's just another tale as old as time, right?
Totally.
When we got closer, though, at least I don't know, Trev. This is what I remember. I remember like having low expectations because I was like, okay, clearly this has been. We know that producers or studios are going to get involved. We know that there's a writer's room changing everything up, but maybe, just maybe, this is just going to be this nice little isolated story that could just be like a little vignette of these characters. We know it's not going to expand into this trilogy. We know it's not going to become, they're not going to show up in the Avengers. But a movie could still be good without those things, And there was still low expectations, but a ceiling of like, well, maybe this could be fine. Maybe we can be. So that was the mindset I remember going into when this movie was finally, on the docket to be released.
Yeah, no, totally. I definitely remember, like you said, I remember going in with low expectations, but at the same time, like you said, I don't mind a singular superhero movie that doesn't have sequels, and I don't, and me, look, my two favorite things are superheroes and horror, and like, so the idea of like,
those are your two favorot things.
Yeah, we're right here, Trev.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I know a few other things that could be added to that list that I don't know if he wants in public. But.
Well, of course, we have, let's go down the list. We got Richard Kind, of course.
Richard Kind, the great Richard Kind.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh, my God, Chris.
Jesus Christ.
Joe, this is great. I got another Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. defender with me here. Chris also.
Stop. This does not count. Chris does not count.
You know what?
Sorry,
I went through it all during the pandemic and watched all of it. I thought it was quite good, and I enjoyed it. Ask me anything about it, and I will not be able to tell you. So
Trev couldn't either. Don't worry, Trev couldn't either.
But that's just because of my late term dementia.
Trev thinks that if he says he likes it, that Fitz or which one's the girl, Fitz or Simmons?
Simmons.
Simmons. Yes. He thinks that Simmons is gonna come hang out with him. Like she's gonna listen to this podcast and be like,
I'm a married man. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Joe, you obviously don't listen to many episodes of our podcast because I think the same thing about this podcast when he talks about really anyone. Because we don't, Joe, we don't like to make fun of actors here. Okay,
no, we don't.
So we want to make sure that they are ripe for the picking.
But Trev is okay to make fun of, right?
Oh yeah,
he's on the table. Okay, good.
Oh yeah.
But no, So I wanted to be mildly optimistic about it going in, saying like, okay, maybe look, this is the end, right? We knew it was the end too, and maybe that was part of it. Is it felt like there was no pressure on it, so it's if it's only 90 minutes, if it's just this like kind of cool horror story with the characters I like, I'll consider it a victory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should we talk about the movie now then?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
What's the last thing you remember, Danny? He said we had to run. The reason you survived is because you're a very uncommon girl. You're not alone. Not anymore. Do you know what mutants are? Would anyone like to share their first time? Rain?
I was 13. I thought it was a dream. I just lost control.
Sam?
I started panicking. People got hurt.
Roberto?
My girlfriend had a partner.
Ileana?
I killed 18 men, one by one. This isn't a hospital. It's a cage.
It's important we find out your power so we can help you get better.
I saw something. I don't think she wanted me to see. I don't think we're here to get better.
This place takes your greatest fear and makes you live through it until it kills you.
is there. We can get out of this together.
After a near-death experience during a strange tornado, Danielle Moonstar wakes up in a research facility run by Dr. Cecilia Reyes. There, Dr. Reyes introduces Danny to 4 other equally uncommon teenagers, Ileana Rasputin, Rain Sinclair, Sam Guthrie, and Roberto DaCosta. Dr. Reyes seemingly wants to keep them safe and sound until they learn how to fully control their extraordinary, albeit dangerous, abilities. Even though this traumatized team of 5 believe they're being cared for, before long, they all start to experience horrifying hallucinations, bringing up their tumultuous pasts. I thought this institution was supposed to be a safe space. Are they patients, or are they prisoners?
Yes, indeed, New Mutants. So, Chris, like I said, Joe and I have already covered this before. People go back and listen to that episode as well of our podcast, and then hear our evolved thoughts now. But I am interested to start with you and hear, because I know this was a first time watch for you. So tell us not only what you think of this movie. You can even maybe say a little bit about your overall thoughts on the X-Men franchise and how this relates to it, the Fox X-Men franchise, of course. But what do you think? What was this? Did what you already heard about it pepper it? What do you think? And what was this like as an introduction to these characters?
As I said before, the X-Men are kind of my favorite superheroes, right? And I think they're the favorites to a lot of people. I mean, you two host a podcast about them, so they're up there for you
Yeah,
two,
but we
too.
don't really care about them that much.
We honestly don't talk that much about the X-Men.
But yeah, I mean, the Fox movies in general are a hit or miss. They've been all over the place. They've had truly great movies and truly shit movies that I would put at the bottom movies that I've ever seen. I look at you, X-Men Origins Wolverine. So the thing though with me is my age. Those movies have a real strong nostalgia hold for me. I was introduced to the X-Men with the 90s cartoon, obviously, but then these movies I grew up with these movies, right? These movies grew with me and vice versa. So I can put up with a lot. That's what I'd say. I can put up a lot with these movies when they are shit or when they are that. Well, I mean, like we just said, Dark Phoenix was okay, and I think that's okay to say. The New Mutants, however, I kind of avoided this when it came out because, as you know, Trev, we started this podcast over 4 years ago, and this movie was delayed up until really we started this podcast in August of 2020. That's when this movie was released. And we were going to talk about it in the springtime. However, you were going to talk about it on your podcast. So we were like, you didn't want to watch it twice back then. So it's taken us this long to get to it. But my thoughts on the movie, this was my first time watch. And in the first 15 minutes of this movie, I was like, this is a TV pilot. Mm-hmm. That was my first reaction to it, that I was like, this is not a movie. I was expecting just the worst. That's what I'll say. I was expecting the absolute worst, just purely because of especially doing the behind the scenes and doing the research for it. I was like, oh my God, the amount of schedules and the amount of backlash towards it. And again, it effectively killing the whole franchise for a while. I was like, man, this has got to be a piece of shit. I will say this. It is just boring. That's what sucks so much about this, is that it's boring. Your movie, The New Mutants, is about me getting to love a group of characters because I want to watch these characters grow and evolve and move on to different adventures. And I think this movie fails at that. I think there's a couple of characters that I like. I think Magic is the best part, I would say. Charlie Heaton's Sam is atrocious. So Cannonball just fucking sucks. And when I was looking at the research of the old property, Cannonball is one of the co-leaders. And I was like, oh my, there's no way that Cannonball's
Joe loves Cannonball.
Cannonball rules. Cannonball is great. He's much cooler in the comics than they do here.
Oh, I bet. But he was just atrocious. And I think the issue here, too, is that you're stuck. assessing and therapizing these characters rather than watch them train, watch them use their powers. Like, I love watching a natural everyday display of powers. I think I talked about this when we did the Miss Peregrine's movie, Trev, that I liked seeing characters just use their powers in everyday life. This has glimpses of that, but not nearly enough. And I think you can sense there's an active attempt at distancing itself from the X-Men, which is strange because it's also trying to connect it at the same time. It's just an obvious hack job in the edit. But I just think it was mostly just boring. Like, I honestly, this is like the least amount of notes I think I've put in one of these episodes for a movie watch. I just thought it fails as a group adventure. It fails at a horror movie. Oh my God.
Can I give what I think is a great example of what you're talking about in this movie?
Sure, please.
Is towards the end, they kind of drug Cecilia Reyes. And they're like, okay, everybody, let's have fun. And here's what we get for them having fun. Is the two is Sunspot and Cannonball wheeling each other down with a wheelchair down a hallway.
Yeah,
it's
very
the same
cool.
shot. It's the same shot. And then a static shot of Wolfsbane and Danny Moonstar, like, with tambourines. And just being like, oh, look how silly we are.
Joe, you've never been to a party, have you?
I mean, if that's a party, I don't know if I want to go. I mean, that screamed to me of like, okay, in the script it just says they goof off. So
totally,
what do you guys do? And they're like, well, me and Charlie have been just dicking around with this wheelchair, and then
film it.
Yeah, and then Maisie was like, oi, governor, we got this tambourine, and then they just start doing stuff with that. So that is this is like a great point, or a great opportunity to prove, like, ooh, let's connect with these fun teenage characters who've been locked up.
Yep.
Let's show them some personality, and what we get is like a student film. Like, hey, my mom needs me to be home by 10, so we got to film this tambourine scene in like 5 minutes. Can we you guys just dance for a little bit? That's what it proves your point of this is a boring movie.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. Look, it's funny, Chris, you said the thing about a TV pilot, because in my original review for this movie and what I wrote and what I said when Joe and I did our episode was I said the same thing. I said it felt like a TV pilot, but not even like a great TV pilot, right? This isn't the Lost pilot. This is like one of those pilots you watch and you go, yeah, I'll give it like 2 or 3 more episodes and see. It's like, it's just maybe intriguing enough to be like, okay, it's not terrible enough to have me bail, but I don't really care. And there's just something missing. And I do think it's funny because you said earlier, like, somebody said how thank God it's only 90 minutes, and I think we can all agree. But it's like it's its biggest benefit and its biggest weakness, right? Because we're all happy it's only 90 minutes, and I think in general we love when movies are shorter nowadays because of the time we have and just how our movies feel so bloated. But this actually is a movie that probably needed more time with these characters because everything feels so rushed and character relationships just change on a whim. We have 2 characters here, Magic and Danny. Magic is like spends the entire movie just being a total bitch to Danny, like she's racist to her, she's just so mean, and then she just suddenly, the movie needs them to be friends, so she just decides to start being nice to her, and it just changes on a dime, and you just can feel like the movie just needs to rush to its ending because it's like we got to get to the superhero battle, but it's not interested in developing anything else. It also just feels, we talked about the budget being cheaper. It feels cheap.
Oh yeah.
There's something what adds to the boredom is there's something so depressing, and not in a good way, not in a, oh cool, it's a spooky horror movie, so I want it to be depressing. More in a, I can't believe I'm watching this depressing. That because the school is so empty, it just makes the movie feel dead. It's so weird. They're in this hospital, and the only other person in the hospital is Reyes. Why not have like a cook character that they can talk to? Why not have like an orderly that is like a security guard that like works for Reyes but is kind of nice to them?
Why aren't there more mutants? Like it's fine to just have your 5 main ones that you're gonna focus on. That the 5 main ones band together and do whatever they need to. We get to know them, but why isn't there any secondary characters like in the actual facility?
Well, so I'll give you oh my God, Josh Boone said one of the other movies that influenced him, and I get it, right, on a base level was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, right? Which is about a bunch of kids in Springwood who are put into this facility because of their experiences with Freddy, and they're put in these therapy sessions. So you see the obvious parallels, right? But if you remember Dream Warriors, they had that great orderly character played by Lawrence Fishburne, who's just in a couple scenes, but he seems so alive, and you got a great actor doing it. And it's like, oh, cool, there's this little character that comes in and can steal a moment and feel like this is an actual hospital, it feels like lived in, and that's just missing here.
Well,
so go ahead.
The interesting thing is that that's what the comic books have. The Demon Bear characters, or the Demon Bear story arc inside the New Mutants, they talk about the groundskeeper for the mansion and the one of the maids. Like, these are like active characters that are in it. And then I think like the dance teacher for one of the kids like shows up. Like that's kind of where you see their biggest fears, right? And you get to kind of have this build up of other characters too. And like it felt like this was filmed during COVID, right? Where they're like, hey,
it's funny, yeah.
This is what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna quarantine everybody in this little weird town, with a mansion. We're gonna film it. There can only be like 10 people on set. We're gonna have minimal camera movements. We're gonna have minimal extras. Mm-hmm. It's just gonna be in these like 6 setups. That's it.
It's weird because it's just like every element of the movie feels like it doesn't get there to what it needs to be, right?
Well, that's
because,
what
like,
I was
Chris
just
said
about
it's not. Yeah, it's not scary, right? You said so. Like they're selling it as a horror movie, and again, who knows? Like whether the fault of this falls on Boone or the studio for not letting him make,
or the fault of our stars, maybe.
You made that joke in our episode too, but
did I really?
Yeah, you did. I was waiting for it.
Oh my god.
You son of a bitch! You sandbagged me.
In our episode, I believe you said maybe it's not Josh Boone's fault, maybe it's the fault of his stars. But
no, that's better. That's funny.
That is better, actually. Yeah. So just stick with your first draft, I guess.
Thank you. Right.
But yeah, so it's trying to be horror, but it's never scary. It's trying to be like a superhero action movie, but it doesn't have enough superheroics in it. It's trying to be this like teen character piece, but it's too rushed to develop any of these relationships. I mean, I brought this up earlier, Chris, is just like, just a joke, but honestly, like Power Rangers eats this movie's lunch as a teenage superhero team origin story, like, and that's a movie that in the same, basically just like, 10 minutes longer, but in more or less the same amount of time, allows us to get to know the characters, fall in love with them, see them develop, to come together as a family and a team. And here it's just like, here's the next character, and they don't like each other, and now they do, and now there's a demon bear, and it's just, and it's not, and it's supposed to be scary, but it's not. And as we get more and more, I have more specifics about how there's so many unanswered questions, and everything is, like you said, it's a hack job. You can feel that as well. But it's bad. I'll say this. I'll give it one compliment right now before we get more specifics. It does come alive really briefly for about 30 seconds
on the stairwell.
When they watch the Hush episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, you pervert.
Which is probably the best episode of that show. And suddenly I was like, people always say don't ever have them watching like a better movie in your movie. And I was reminded of that with this scene.
So I'll say I'm going to give it a compliment and not a Buffy the Vampire. You're pro Joss Whedon. I forgot about that, right?
Pro Buffy, not pro Whedon. It's an important distinction. Chris is with me as well.
You're pro Whedon. You're pro Cosby, right? And then I think you still have that OJ stuff, right? You love OJ. Anyways, so here's where it does come alive, right? It doesn't really come alive. There is like scattered throughout this, like enough to make us like a sizzle reel of some action.
Yeah.
And the best part of this movie is the special effects, which I'm not saying these are amazing special effects, and there are some real shit special effects as well. I'm thinking the demon bear with Rain in front in the church. There's just like some awful green screening. But there is actually some like nice effects in a lot of what Magic does, and some nice things that happen where I go, they were able to do something during those 3 years, and that was to kind of work on some of these special effects. So I do think that hits the best. I think the script is weak. I think the acting, almost across the board, is just awful. Even the more established stars, like I like Ilana, but I thought that performance was, for Anya Taylor-Joy, bad.
Run, you girl, run! Aww, this isn't the hospital, Pocahontas. It's a cage. And now you're trapped in it forever.
I did not like that. She's probably the best one in the film, and I hated her performance.
But it's funny because like Maisie Williams is in this movie, right? And you know, this was the weird time when everyone loved Game of Thrones, right? And like every property, nerd property, and the MCU as well was trying to scoop these guys up, you know, and sign them up to 3 to 6 film deals, and then eventually drop them all because the world turned on Game of Thrones. Maisie Williams is so okay in this, and her design of changing into a wolf is just bad. It kept reminding me of that Family Guy where Meg's nails grow longer, and like that's her superpower. Like Trev was mentioning how it just doesn't succeed in the horror and adventure and group dynamic, right? And sorry?
Go ahead. I was cutting you off. Go ahead.
No. But I mean, like, there's specific examples to. She's a werewolf, and it's never horrific enough to be a werewolf. There's a moment in the lie detector game that they do where Ileana, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, says that she killed 18 men, and it just cuts away and becomes a new scene, and you're like, oh, you know, a horror movie would have maybe done a quick flash of her killing 18 men or something. Or there's the what's his name, Roberto, talking about how he burned his girlfriend alive. And again, doesn't show me any imagery of doing that. Nothing. In a different movie, it would have cut away, and while he tells you the memory, we see it. So it is horrific to the viewer. But because it's all this like tell no show, it just, you know, falls on its face when it comes to being a horror movie, and it just kind of frustrates you as a viewer.
Well, especially when you have bad actors, right? Like a good, okay, maybe not bad actors, but bad performances.
We don't like make fun of actors. We keep saying that.
Bad,
I don't know
bad performances. Bad performances.
Which you can say sometimes falls on directing, right? So maybe
exactly. But I will say that Wolfsbane is a shit character in the comic books too. I don't think she works ever. I don't know. That's just she shows up, she pops up, and it's always boring. Like the way they write out like Scottish accents in comic book form just drives me up the wall. And then the other thing is there's like 7 werewolf characters in the
it's like a whole subsect of mutants. Yeah,
and they're all stupid. Like they never click. They're just like the worst faction, and so it doesn't click with me.
Can I say one? I guess maybe okay thing if it was handled better.
Yeah,
is I think the bait and switch of who's behind all of this is okay. You know, it's hold on. Which I'm telling you from a perspective of somebody that forgot about that other evil side of things, or just the general audience of being like, oh, like spoilers, everybody. But it's set up that maybe this is taking place just off the grounds of the X Mansion, and Professor X is behind this. And, you know, Professor X in the comics, however, compared to the movies, it, you know, does have an edge to him, and maybe he's
a pervert in the comics.
Yeah, like he's done some bad things in the comics. So, you know, with that knowledge in my head, I'm like, okay, this is interesting that if this is actually happening under Professor X's watch. However, the bait and switch is that it's not. It's the Essex Corporation, so like Mr. Sinister and that. And it sort of works. However, if you are a total normie, a complete non-X-Men head, you would just be sitting there being like, huh? Who? What? Who cares?
This is a shit or get off the pot problem, because this was at this point the third Fox movie that had teased Mr. Sinister and just was not finally delivering it, because he'd been teased in Apocalypse, he'd been teased in Logan, and now he's teased in this one. And it's just like, and they had talked to John Hamm about it. He was apparently interested. Bryan Cranston had mentioned at one point that he would want to play Mr. Sinister, which was crazy to me that he would say that and they just wouldn't immediately sign him up, you know. But it just never happened. And so like I guess like the misdirect maybe is like kind of compelling, but
there's a way it could work. There's a way it could work, and so in the comics, the start of the comics, the New Mutants are led by Magneto. Good guy Magneto, but he's kind of their leader, right? He and so there is this kind of worry of like, oh, our leader used to commit war crimes a lot, like and now he's trying to educate us, and so there is this semblance of are we doing the right thing? Are we the baddies? Sort of thing, and the problem is like you open with Danny Moonstar like being like handcuffed to like a gurney and locked in this room. If they would have made it less like of a dilapidated hospital and more of like an X-Mansion where they are having fun,
Yep.
and also we've watched the X-Mansion for 20 years. We know that it looks better than this. Like, even if it's not the main mansion, we know it's not this dilapidated place where you just rip off boards to go off the clock tower and jump off, right? Like the misdirect doesn't work because you already know it's a piece of shit. You already know that it's dilapidated.
I wrote this down in my notes, being like, so wait, the New Mutants are being sequestered and imprisoned, and I'm like, is this how our heroes start?
And to me, like when I watched the movie the first time, I remember being like, oh, Cecilia Reyes, who's a good guy, she isn't in on this, so she's also like she's gonna like somehow get them out. Like that's what I was waiting for.
Right.
And so when she turns out to be kind of in on it the whole time and never like turns face, you're just kind of like, oh, okay.
That's what I was just about to bring up, because like Chris mentioned, like the villain element may be working to like a normie, but this is the thing where if you're not a normie, it gets frustrating and baffling, because this is like indicative of something that people kept complaining about with the Fox franchise from the very beginning, about just like this kind of general lack of concern and care about how they used a lot of the X characters. To where they like basically you always got the sense that like the people making these movies were given a binder with X character names and powers, and then just were like, okay, that seems cool for this, but they didn't really look to see if that made any sense. So throughout the entire Fox franchise, you would have certain characters who were heroes in the book and they would present them as a villain, or vice versa. And Reyes is like an ultimate example of that, to where, Chris, you probably, this maybe the worst surprising you right now, but Dr. Reyes is a total hero in the comics. She is she is a recurring character. She's been around forever. She's she's been on the X-Men, but she's almost always an ally to the X-Men. She's actually a pretty cool character, because there's a whole thing where she doesn't want to be a superhero. She just wants to be a doctor. So she is the one that, like, when there's a big superhero battle, because she can create these force fields, she can go into like a war zone and create these like triage areas for the X-Men to help take care of them. So to take that character and just make her into a flat out villain with no redeeming qualities, it's just one of those things like, why did you do that? And I'm not, both you guys know me, I'm not Mr. You have to be 100% fuel, like 100% fuel to source material is not my concern. But when you make those kind of changes, they have to be justified. You have to be doing them for some interesting reason, and there's no reason here other than we couldn't think of a different character to use. And it's Reyes, and she's bad now. So there you go.
She never puts up a fight against the idea of like torturing and or killing our heroes. And that totally, that really bothered me, because there's the moment when the reveal happens, when they send, she gets the text or whatever on her computer, and it says, Danielle not Reyes, sorry. What did I say? Moonstar. She is a threat and you have to eliminate her. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, well, she's going to have to battle with that. And then just right away grabs her and drugs her.
In an interesting movie, she would actually think she's working for Xavier, and that would be the moment where she realizes she's not, and she would fight back against it, right?
Correct.
In an interesting movie, like you said, there would be like this more kind of like in-depth exploration of the fact that all these kids maybe killed someone or hurt someone when their powers manifested, and they have to deal with that. That's interesting, right? So there's like all these interesting things that are right there under the surface, but the movie has no interest or no time to get into them, and that's what keeps like killing it. And like as you guys talked, I was just jotting down notes because there's so many things I wanted to get back to. Ileana's whole storyline is the ultimate example of that, and the ultimate indication to me of how much this movie is like a hack job, and how it's cut up and things are missing and they didn't get to where they wanted to go with it. Because I agree also, I think Ileana is the MVP. Now, whether that's just because I'm such a fan of Anya Taylor-Joy, whether it's because I'm such a Magic fan, maybe, right? I even slightly defended her accent, which I know is cartoony Russian, but I still kind of liked it, especially compared to whatever the hell Charlie Heaton was doing with his southern accent.
I never did have a choice. I had to go and work in the mines with my dad. And this one day I just got claustrophobic. I screamed. couldn't forgive myself.
But I do think she's like the obvious like highlight here. That said, her storyline makes no sense, right? Like so in the comics, it's we don't even have the time to get into Ileana's storyline, but the very basic version is, she's Colossus' sister. She's introduced in the comics as a very little girl, and she's actually stolen away to another dimension called Limbo, where her entire childhood is basically lost to her loved ones because she spends like years in this Limbo dimension being raised by this demon, Belasco. And when she finally gets out, it's kind of like more time has passed for her than has passed for everyone else. So it's that kind of thing where Colossus thinks like, he lost Ileana when she was like 10, and then she comes back and she's now like 18, and she's like this hardened warrior who has demon powers because she was raised in this other dimension. Okay, that's pretty interesting, right? This movie doesn't have any of that, right? She's just like this bitch. You said she says she killed 18 men. We never find the story behind that. We see that she's like haunted by these like weird smiley creatures.
The discount pale man.
That. Yeah, the discount pale man. No explanation for that, right? Now, this is the first time when Joe and I first saw this. I know we both saw it in the drive-in theater because of the whole COVID thing, and I couldn't see shit. And like so, this time I could see slightly some shit. It's still a very dark movie, but this is the first time I did notice that the smiling men are like covered in tattoos under their shirts. So there was a part of me was wondering, okay, are they supposed to be like Russian gangsters, and this is just the way she sees them?
Yeah, that's
was she
how I
like
took
involved
it.
in some kind of like sex trafficking thing when she's young, which is like gross to think about in a superhero movie, but is that what they're aiming for? But the movie just doesn't provide any answers. So it's like, she's the best character because her powers are cool and because she's the only one who's like allowed to have a little bit of personality. But at the same time, I don't know shit about her by the end of the movie, even though there's like so much crux on her storyline. So
again, if you are going to fall, like we ask this question every episode, Joe, is does this movie deserve to have sequels? And right now I'm going to say no, because I don't give a shit about seeing these characters go forward, especially not together. Like, again, I said in my notes, maybe a magic movie. Maybe. And for little, because I the exact same reasons Trev said. But this group together, I do not care about. I don't, there's just not enough to engage deeply or emotionally with them. And at least after the first X-Men movie, you left that movie being like, wow, I need to see these characters again. And I need them to be on the next level. When we see them, they're going to be trained better. They're going to have fucking uniforms next time. And I cannot wait. And in this movie, it ended, and I'm like, oh man, put this movie out of its misery.
And it's such a shame too, right? Because like one of the elements of that I think is such a bummer is like, still to this day, we keep waiting for this genre to have like good LGBTQ representation, right? And this is like one of the big things in this movie was they're finally actually giving us a queer couple at the center, right? So we get Danny and Rain as a couple, and it's like, I do want to applaud the movie for that, but again, it's like, oh, not like this, not like this, like where it's like when we finally get it, it's in this movie where it just, again, it kind of comes out of nowhere. You don't really like, you understand that they are going to become a couple just because like you've seen a movie before, but the movie's really not putting in the work to make you fall for them together. So it's just such a bummer.
The interesting thing is like, I would love to explore these characters again, right? Like even within the greater MCU, like Danny's got a lot of great stuff with Valkyrie and Thor. Like her character becomes this amazing. I mean, she is actually pretty amazing early on, and grows and has a great arc. Cannonball.
I'd say, sorry, Joe, really quick, because I know you like Cannonball, but I'd say after Magic, I think Danny is my favorite New Mutant.
Yeah. No, I would probably go Cannonball, Danny. I like Magic. I'm not as wild about her as you are, but I think she's great. Definitely better than Rain. And Sunspot's fine. Like it kind of depends on what character or what he kind of gets written as. Some people kind of just write him as the rich, cocky guy, and that's just what he becomes. And so when he gets like a writer in a book that wants to explore what that means and his backstory and his family, then it is interesting.
Yeah. It's too easy to write him as just an asshole, but when you explore like what that wealth means for him and why he might be an asshole, it's more interesting.
Well, that's why like I really think the direction of this movie, like the director really gave bad notes. Like the second you see Sunspot like man spreading and like wearing like a popped collar shirt and like that initial therapy thing, like that guy, he got the worst notes on set that day of what to do.
This is why I went back to in the beginning, and I said I understand there was a lot of studio interference, and I understand that there was planned reshoots that again never got reshot.
Yeah.
So I do blame a lot of this on Josh Boone. I genuinely do think, like, no matter what, if this got a couple more reshoots, or they said, I think they needed 3 days or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, you ain't fixing this in 3 days.
that's what I mean. Like, this guy still directed this, like, just nothing burger of a movie. Like, he still did shoot these scenes of them being so boring in their therapy sessions, of scenes of them not using their powers, scenes of them not even getting along or having fun. Like, again, Joe, the scene with the wheelchair is, that's the scene truly did break me. I'm so glad you brought it up, because again, having fun, these characters, I want to see them grow. And the fucking wheelchair in the hallway, come on, give me a break.
You're telling me no one on set, like I can immediately improve that in like 10 seconds, right? Why not have, okay, you're gonna have them in a wheelchair, push each other around, have one of them be like, look at me, I'm Professor X, right? Just make a joke, just throw a fucking joke in the movie.
Totally.
Allow us to like connect these characters on like any level like that, and like, but the movie, and that's the thing, like all the reshoots they talked about were, all I ever heard them saying were, we going back to make it scarier, but that's not the movie's problem. Yes,
not.
It sucks that it's aiming for scares, it's not hitting it, but if I had heard them say, we're going back for 3 days because we realized we fucked up on all the character stuff and we want to film 18 monologues, then I would be like, oh, okay, maybe they would have fixed it. But if they were just going back to film some jump scares, no, it wouldn't have mattered.
Here's the interesting thing. So this was what, filmed 6 years ago about? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
Josh Boone has not done anything of note.
No. In fact, he went from doing this to doing like a new version of The Stand, which everyone was like, we don't need this. We already have a TV miniseries that was fine, you know?
So like, I'm not saying that he may have had a fluke in his initial thing, right? But it wasn't like this was a blip on the radar for it. Like, he might not be that great of a storyteller. Like, and
exactly.
He might not be able to direct, movies, and that's okay. A lot of us can't.
Yeah, because we said the best stuff is probably like some of this special effects action stuff, right? And we know that wasn't him. That's just like so that's just previs, and like a moment I do like, and I think I mentioned this when we first reviewed it, Joe. It's like really brief, but like you said, there's like some actual cool like special effects things. Most of them having to do with magic. Mm-hmm. There's that really cool shot where she's striking the demon bear with her soul sword, and every time she hits him, it suddenly like turns into limbo all around
Limbo,
him.
Yeah,
like that rules. It looks so cool, and it's like, but then again, it looks cool, but then you go, oh, why is it happening? What is limbo in this? What are the rules of it? Why is Lockheed just a puppet that becomes a dragon in this? Again, Chris, like Lockheed is an actual like alien being in the comics, and so it's like I don't understand the whole puppet thing here. It's just
during that I was questioning why we didn't have more bear puns, because we had two back to back with Hey Yogi and then lions, tigers, bears, oh my, which first of all doesn't make any sense.
I don't know if they have Yogi Bear over in Russia either, by the way.
But also, if you're gonna do that, go hard. Go. These are my bear necessities. Like go. Time to feed the bears. Like you got.
You're barely a challenge.
You're bad news. And then it just doesn't say bear, and we all laugh.
Oh, that's pretty good. I like that. It just doesn't. You didn't earn that action sequence.
No.
Right? Like, and also like to get to that like 3 minutes of goodness, you have to sit through 45 minutes of some bad stuff. And I think Chris, you hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest sin that this movie does is that it's boring. That's like, you can't make this movie boring. You can make it bad, you can make it stupid, but you can't make it boring.
Think of the X-Men movies right now, okay? Are the other ones, all of them, even again, X-Men Origins Wolverine, one of my top 10 worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. Is that movie boring?
Not even slightly.
It's not, right?
No, that's the thing. Like, this is no doubt a better movie than X-Men Origins Wolverine. Which one would I rather watch right now? X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Easily.
I'm not sure I would say this movie's better than that. I agree that there are certain moments to it, but yeah, you can't be boring if you're this. Like,
Yeah.
that is no way. Please
A
don't.
90-minute boring movie really means something went off, right? Because like it's like
Yeah.
once a movie gets to 2.5 hours and you go it's boring, you're like, yeah, okay, it probably went on a little bit too long. But like when it's this compact and you're still finding a way to bore the audience, you know, something has gone awry on your like just general script level.
This also felt like just very, chickening out on the whole X-Men universe concept.
Yes, I wanted
right?
to bring this up. Yes.
Like you said earlier about why not make a Professor X joke, right? And like I threw my notes at 40 minutes is when they finally reference the X-Men in some way, right?
Yeah.
It's very brief, it's very subtle, and I just felt like this is the wrong time for this kind of movie. Like we're 20 years past this weird feelings of like being like ashamed of our origins, right?
That's
and
what this movie reminded me of, is how those like 90s and early 2000s superhero movies were so embarrassed of it, because I clocked too, I'm sure you guys did, that the only code name that's kind of used in the movie is the part where they tell Ileana like,
You're crazy! That thing will kill you!
He's right, it's magic.
So am I.
and that's it, right?
I know.
And but no one else. We never hear Cannonball. We never hear Mirage. We never hear Sunspot. No code names. No costumes. No like even indication that they want to become X-Men. Like it's brought up, and like I think only one of them seems interested in it. So yeah, it just feels like so and disconnected to the point. Like by the time we, again, Dark Phoenix was the one before us. By the time we got to Dark Phoenix, we finally had the X-Men in like matching uniforms and really relying on teamwork, and like so this feels like regressive suddenly. We're
Big
like,
time.
oh, we're back to being embarrassed by our source material.
It's interesting because, like, in Deadpool, they make that joke of when the main villain says mutant in, like, the first 5 minutes, and Deadpool's like, oh, the M word, or something like that. Like that was kind of the, like, wink at the camera of, like, okay, we're ready to embrace it. And this movie, because it was delayed, just seems so archaic in the like, let's embrace superheroes type thing. Like, so we're not going to use code names, we're not going to use the costumes, and they could have easily fixed that.
Why is there no danger room? Why is there no training? Why is there like there's like one scene of Cannonball going in a fucking circle out of control, and you're like, that looks so cool and I like this, and I'm like, why not have them? Why doesn't Dr. Reyes, instead of sitting around in a fucking circle talking about her feelings, why doesn't she put them in dangerous situations to see if they're going to kill somebody? Because that is the whole idea. The whole thing of their plan is to train them into killers. Why doesn't she test them in a situation where somebody will be maimed or hurt or killed, even if it's fake? Use the danger room technology. Why not? And it's because of what we're just saying. It's regressive in that sense. This
really
movie is made out of the wrong thought process of where we are now with superheroes.
It really is just, at the end of the day, the ultimate sin here is that it's just the wrong choice, the wrong story to introduce these characters, because
totally.
And it totally comes from a place of overthinking it, right? Of being a filmmaker and saying, oh my God, I know I'm making a superhero movie like, 10 or so years into the superhero boom, so I'm going to make the one that's different, right? I'm going to do the superhero horror story. And then getting too locked into that idea and not realizing that, no, we don't want to, that's not how we want to meet these characters. And it's an easy fix. Like you just said, like you could instead do the thing where it's similar, right? They all wake up in this place, but it is an actual school. And and then we see them being trained to become a team, and they become the New Mutants. And then halfway through the movie, they discover that like, oh my God, we're a team of superheroes, but we're not working for Professor X. We're working for Mr. Sinister. We've been misled. We're a bad team. And now we have to turn against our mentor and become the heroes we're actually meant to be. That's the movie. That's the movie right there. And instead, he was like, no, I think it'll be cooler if they never wear their costumes. It's not even connected to X-Men. It's like a spooky mental institution with like demons showing up and ghosts. And it's like, but that's
while you're saying that, I'm doing the wank off, with my hands. That's Josh Boone right now.
That's like New Mutants was the fun and deep and like interesting and like realistic teen mutant story, and it wasn't just horror. Like, I don't know.
You got to be you got to be an artist, right? You got to make regress, or I guess transgressive. Is that what I want to say? You got to be different. You go against the curb of like what superheroes are right now, and it just does not work right like with this at all.
Yeah, it's like, but why even use the New Mutant? Like, why?
Exactly.
You're if you're not going to embrace the characters, Because I mean, they did like surface level, like, oh, okay, Sam is worked at a coal mine. They didn't bring up the fact that the concept of Sam is that his dad dies in the coal mine, right? And then he has to raise all his siblings. Like, that's his thing, is that he's the oldest of the Guthrie children. All, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 of them end up joining the New Mutants with their own powers, right? One of them almost has Archangel end up on Dateline because he tries to date this, like, 16-year-old girl that they... I don't know, it was very Paige Guthrie. Anyways, like... They could have done a lot more with the characters, but they just did surface level stuff. Here's the biggest thing that I think is so funny. They did this. We talked about it on our show. This music video for Lila Cheney, who is a rock star mutant who ends up dating Sam, and her thing is she can teleport anywhere in the universe. No one knows this. She's just this rock star, right? Joan Jett. Rock star. And someone just made this 3-minute long short film music video, and it's all about Sam Guthrie and Lila Cheney at this concert, and the music's awesome, and you get more character arc and development in this guy's performance as this no-name music video Sam Guthrie than you get in this whole movie from this character. They just do surface level stuff that don't touch on anything. Why make it a New Mutants movie? If you want to make a horror movie about teens, make a horror movie about teens. If you're going to do New Mutants, make it a New Mutants movie.
Joe, I'm gonna clock 2 arcs. 1, Magic stops being racist. Okay. 2, Danny realizes that she killed her entire reservation of people and her dad, but does not have to deal with it.
Yeah, let's carry on. Yeah, there wasn't much.
Maybe
of
this
an
is a
arc
good
for
time because we talked about it earlier. We said we were going to get to it, and since this is turning into the let's shit on Josh Boone section, maybe this is a good time to address the controversy about the casting of this movie.
Sure.
Which relates to a number of the characters, because this is a movie that was hit with accusations of whitewashing on not 1, not 2, but 3 characters. And it's interesting because it is the case. This is one of those strange cases where the controversy is understandable. And in a moment, we're going to talk about something Josh Boone said, which I think was a really unfortunate way to respond to it. But it's that strange thing where they were casting the right ethnicities and races for the parts. But you watch the movie and you go, well, okay, but they were definitely casting the lightest skinned possible actors within that. So Blue Hunt is Native American as Danny Moonstar. What's Roberto's actor's name?
Henry Zaga.
Henry Zaga. He is Brazilian, right? So, and then with Alice Braga as Dr. Reyes, but it's just people are still saying well, yes, but just with Storm in the X-Men movies, why are these characters always darker in the source material, and then then you do light-skinned actors? And Josh Boone was asked about this, and this is I don't know, a media training problem, or just maybe just shows this guy's should have thought these things through. I want to read his response because it was worded so poorly. So he was asked about the fact of, Henry Zaga, maybe being too light-skinned to be Roberto da Costa. And now we should say, to be fair, this is something Joe and I have talked about. This is a huge controversy in X-Men in general, because throughout the decades of X-Men comics, different artists have colored Roberto differently in the comics. People get really upset that there has been long runs where they suddenly make him look more white, even though he started as more clearly Afro-Brazilian. But so Josh Boone was asked about that, and he says, "You won't have any argument for me. I saw every shade of the sun. It was the same case with Blue Hunt. It's we looked at 300 Native American people and people with very close ties to the Native American community. My goal was just to find the best actor who, because they've done so little work, was at least the closest to kind of what I saw in my head for the character. There was nobody who held a candle to Henry. It's maybe if Henry didn't exist, I would have found somebody who was darker skinned, who exemplified what I needed. But it was never about the color of their skin for me." And then he went on to say, and this is where it gets really into oops, maybe, I don't know if you realize what you're saying. He says, "I didn't care so much about the racism I've heard about in Brazil, about light-skinned versus dark-skinned. To me, it was why I wanted to represent Brazil in a positive way, and I wanted to find somebody who seems like he could look like a guy who's had the silver spoon in his mouth, who has like a really rich dad, and Henry just exemplified all these things.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no, Josh, stop talking. Stop.
What about him makes what visually about this actor makes you think that he could have the silver spoon? Yeah. Like we talk about this a lot in our show. Representation matters big time, right?
Yes.
And especially in these communities, and especially with Sunspot, this character, like Trev, you just mentioned, has been whitewashed over the years.
Yeah, and he's actually a character, if you go back and look at the initial graphic novel, he is a character that is introduced with a moment of racism, where he's being bullied on a soccer team because he's black.
Yeah. And that's his whole thing, right? And like that's a big part of that storyline. And to kind of like remove that is not great.
It's not even his storyline though, because like think of it this way. Traditionally speaking in this podcast, I butt up less against this stuff than Trev does. However, when it comes to mutants and X-Men, diversity and inclusion and all that stuff is like the theme. It's like the thing. Racism is the metaphor, is the allegory. LGBTQ, all that stuff is baked into the fucking pie. So when you hear the director of the New Mutants for a new generation say, "I don't care about racism,"
well, even when
he's a little out to lunch.
Even if you want to, like, if you don't want to be Mr. like, you know, you want to have your concerns about like woke or whatever, right? All that dumb stuff. Like, just think about it on the level of like how you're shortchanging yourself as a storyteller, right? And the possibilities you're pulling away from yourself. Because you say, when you're asked about like the racism in Brazil, about light skin versus dark skin, you go like, well, I don't really care about that. Well, why wouldn't you? Because that's such a part of Roberto's character that's interesting stuff to explore. The comics have done it. So why wouldn't you be interested in exploring that? Why would you instead say, no, I just want a light-skinned, handsome guy because he looks rich? Like, what?
So bad.
I think, I guess, I should have looked this up. Isn't Cecilia Reyes supposed to be Puerto Rican and not Brazilian?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so they got a Brazil, and that actor they got for Cecilia is Brazilian, I believe.
Yeah, well, and she was a replacement, right? So it was originally Rosario Dawson, and then they replaced. Yeah,
and so like Cecilia Reyes has a Puerto Rican descent, but is like she's introduced as like a doctor, a trauma doctor in New York during this big superhero event, and like Trev says, I forget, is it Iceman she ends up helping? I even forget which storyline it is, but she's like, I don't want to become a hero. I'm a doctor. Like this is who I'm supposed to be. But she is also dark skinned Puerto Rican character. Like that is a part of her living in New York City.
And like I said, and no offense to Blue Hunt, who I actually do think is also pretty good in this, but like again, just like Danny Moonstar is also darker skinned in the comics than she is here. So it's just like it's just the thing. And like, and again, it is also true that, you know, whatever you think about Halle Berry and Alexander Shipp, like Storm is typically drawn darker skinned in the comics than she is in the movies. So it's just like, this is something that Fox kept having an issue with, so, you know, the fact that they kept having this issue with it, and just honestly, Hollywood has an issue with it. It's something that, you know, probably they should do better with, but also definitely your filmmakers should be better equipped to respond to it when it's brought up, because these aren't things to be flippant about. These do matter to people. There are fans of these characters who are fans because they feel like that character looks like how I look. And so to say you don't care about it is just so insensitive and like Chris said, exactly, like maybe you're not the person to be doing an X-Men movie if you don't care about these kind of things.
Right.
You saw the co-creator of New Mutants, Bob McLeod, expressed his disdain for all this too. He said a few things. He really hated just how inaccurately they depicted the characters. I was disappointed when they didn't give Danny braids, another aspect of Native American culture. Although I like Blue Hunt, I was disappointed when Rain wasn't a redhead with spiky hair, although I adore Maisie Williams. I was disappointed that Sam isn't tall and gawky, although I do like Charlie Heaton. But do you? Come on, you don't. But mainly I was very disappointed that Roberto isn't short and dark-skinned. Yet another example of Hollywood whitewashing. So,
Bob McLeod also upset that they misspelled his name in the credits.
Yeah, wow, what a sensitive guy.
Which I believe has been fixed now, but in the theatrical release,
they fixed it for all the people buying their New Mutants copies of the movie.
Yeah, suckers like us watching it online.
I mean, for the movie itself, I don't really have much more to say about it. We kind of did talk about what happened after, and it's just the implosion of the Fox universe. However, last year we saw Deadpool and Wolverine kind of be a little bit of a swan song to the Fox universe, except for this movie, which I thought was pretty funny that they did not include anything of this in the credits.
But that actually does lead to a question I wanted to ask you guys as we are wrapping this up, because I think it's safe to say, Chris, you already answered this, but Joe, do you think this deserves sequels?
No.
Okay, and I don't either. But to come back to the Deadpool Wolverine thing, not just like the swan song to the Fox universe, but a conversation I know you and I had about that movie, Chris, and I kept having the people about Deadpool Wolverine, is like, even though it was a movie I enjoyed, and I think Joe and I did an episode all about that too, and I think I've talked about this, where it's a movie I enjoyed, but at the same time I was very aware of like the concerns it raises about Hollywood and superhero genre in general moving forward, right? Where it's just like, okay, that movie was fun, but it also kind of represents that we are stuck in this like nostalgia, member-berry, inescapable chasm right now, right? Where just like anytime they need to like make people excited, they just trot out a character from the past or an actor who hasn't been seen for a while, and like that's just a crutch at this point, right? And one thing Deadpool Wolverine made clear with like bringing back like Chris Evans as Johnny Storm or Jennifer Garner as Elektra is these don't even need to be characters from beloved movies, right? Or movies that people said they liked at the time. It's just like they know people will pop if they just bring back anyone. Do you guys think that in this like multiverse world, is there any possibility of seeing any of these characters? And when I say that, I'm of course saying we're just talking about Anya Taylor-Joy,
correct?
Right? Because it's the only one they would even think about for the two obvious reasons, right? She has remained a star and in fact become a bigger star since then, and as we said, Magic has just remained like the only like of this group of characters. She is still the one who's the biggest deal in the comics right now. So do you guys think there's any possibility we might see her in like a Secret Wars or something, or is it just? Are we totally done with this and they're going to wash their hands of this forever?
If you would have asked me 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I would have said yeah. In a post-Deadpool world, Deadpool and Wolverine world, I should say, like, no. If they would have included her, she would have been in that. I don't see her.
I feel like the opposite.
World.
I almost feel like the opposite, where if you had asked me 3 years ago, I just said, no, we'll never see them again. And I think in a post-Deadpool Wolverine world, where I feel like they've set up that they can just like trot out whoever they want whenever, that's where it makes me think like, I could see her showing up in like a battle scene or something.
I remember, though, like when we were talking about who's going to survive the Fox buyout, and I think we had a sense that Anya Taylor-Joy was going to continue to be a star, and I remember saying like, well, I think Deadpool and maybe Magic, right? Because not only are those actors really popular, but those characters are just popular in pop culture, and so I could see that being the person they bring, somehow bring her through. But now I'm like, well, they would have done it. I don't see where there's gonna be so many pops in Secret Wars that would Magic be one? I don't think so.
Well, my concern is Secret Wars is going to be like 300 of those and nothing else, so that's why I think there might be room for her. But
I think
I won't be surprised either way.
I think nobody is immune to being part of the MCU anymore. Like once Robert Redford was in those movies, I was like, oh, okay, anyone can be in these movies. But if they are wanting Anya Taylor-Joy to be in the MCU at some point, I would not be shocked if they said, hey, do you want another crack at Ileana? Do you want another crack at Magic? I can see that happening. Would that happen in Secret Wars? I don't think so. I don't think there's enough nostalgia power at play. I think it comes down to more of a how do we lure a great talent into the MCU proper and maybe give her a leading role. You know what I mean? I don't know if they'd get her back for a cameo, but I just don't think it's going to like hit the way that, Wesley Snipes does. You know,
you're right. And that is the thing too. It's like, we're still so far away from the X-Men, coming into the MCU in a big way, right? We've started to see it starting to trickle in, and we've had our first appearances of like Beast and things like that. But we're still quite a ways away from an X-Men movie, which means who knows how far away we are from Ileana? Because obviously, like I said, first we're gonna just deal with the X-Men '97 characters, I'm sure for first. So
hey, maybe this new. They haven't announced anything for X-Men truly. Like maybe it is going to be the New Mutants. Like who knows? Maybe they are going to try to get away from the.
Here's the thing. It won't be. Trust me. It's
because
going to be
Cyclops. Do you think it's because of
Cyclops,
97?
Storm, Rogue. Yes.
No,
X-Men '97 is.
It's going to be Gen X, Generation X.
No, because Gen X doesn't even matter anymore, right? It would have to be like, oh my god, it's just going to be like the Zillennials, but with what if the Rizzler plays like Colossus?
Oh, dude. Do you think what's his name would be upset? Who's shit?
AJ or
no? Who?
Oh, Daniel Cudmore.
Daniel Cudmore. This is not our show.
I know on this show. Fortunately, we don't like making fun of actors. We can't talk about how Daniel Cudmore is probably working craft service on this movie, going like, "Oh, you guys sure you don't need Colossus to come in and talk to Ileana?" Like, no, we're good, Daniel. You can go back to making the ham sandwiches for the rest of
No lettuce on Charlie's, okay, buddy?
Hey, Colin Farrell just thanked the craft service person on the Penguin, so you know
it
what?
Might have been Daniel Cudmore.
Craft service is. I'm not making fun of craft service. I'm making fun of Daniel Cudmore, but I don't like making fun of actors. So.
Well, you aren't making fun of actors. You're making fun of a caterer.
I don't think he's an actor anymore. Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Yeah, that's really it for New Mutants. Again, this is. I will be surprised if there's any referential treatment of this going forward. However, if there would be, Anya Taylor-Joy, I don't mind seeing her in really anything.
Yeah, no, the only shot is her, and and I think that's the thing is like she's still the right person to play this part. I think she still looks like magic. Like you said, she's a star. She's a bigger star.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think anyone cares enough about this movie to have to do it in a sense where you'd be referring back to this version of it. So.
Mm-hmm. First of all, before we do our send off, Joe, thanks, buddy. This was fun.
Yeah, you know what? I really appreciate being here. It really makes up for all the time that Trev calls me Chris on our podcast.
A couple times, not gonna
You know
lie.
what? You know what? He's never called me Joe. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. He likes me a lot less, so I get it.
No, but for real, thanks for coming on. We don't have guests much. We've done it a few times, and it's always been a blast. So this is fun too because like I've listened to Days of Future podcast a bunch of times, and it's just cool. Like to just kind of combine our own little two universes.
A little MCU, PCU.
Honestly, the three of us coming together in this episode was handled better and had more emotional depth, than New Mutants. Like this was a better team up.
Just like magic, you overcame your racism. So really great job, buddy.
Oh, just you wait, Joe.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, the next installment of the mutant. What's the theme?
The Mutant Gene-uary.
Mutant Gene-uary is the Mutant Chronicles. From 2008?
A movie I discovered last time. You have no idea what it is, right?
No idea.
You said you thought it was a YA adaptation, and it is not. So
okay. So I'm flying so blind.
Okay.
Yeah. Follow us at F2F Pod. That's at F2 the number 2F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe and come along with us. The Mutant Gene-uary. Oh, Trev went away.
Oh, wow. He does this happen a lot? Where he runs away? Scared?
Damn. I'll send him another thing.
You want me to? I'll bust out my Trev impression. I'll just do that. Hey guys, yeah, I like books and horror.
Do you know? Can you talk for 15 minutes uninterrupted?
Can I? Oh, that's funny.